we're back for some more. Actually, I'm not sure what I'm back for. But today we're going to be reading some of the best horror games to scare yourself silly with. There's 25. So, yeah. The best horror games aren't just about blood and loud noises to make you jump. I mean, that could be a big part, but a good horror game knows that letting you scare yourself is better than any monster jumping through the window. This is a list of the best horror games you can play right now. It encompasses a broad range of terror from more contemplative slow burners to full monster splattered fest. There's something to fit every mood, so decide whether you want to be creeped out, terrified, disgusted, or just experience the worst horror games there's to offer. Whatever you're after, we've got something for you in our list of best horror games, and certainly enough to keep you busy until the rumored Silent Hill PS5 reboot arrives. If that'll ever happen, it'll most certainly earn a place on this list. But where? Better get playing, because you got some reference. Number 25, Pathologic 2. Yes, Pathologic 2 is a mess to play. Yes, you should play it because the slow disintegration of the town you're moving around is a refreshing alternative to your character simply being dropped into a hellish situation, or you're walking down ever repeatedly hallways as a minuscule unsettling changes. Pathologic 2 isn't just only scary, but it's also a plain weird and just occasionally disgusting. If you're willing to deal with its systems, you're in for something unique and in a genre often bogged down by game's sameness. A truly unique game that is more interested in being suspenseful and pleasantly unsettling is a welcome alternative to the games that purposely try to shock you. I'm so sorry. I don't know why that was so hard to read. My brain doesn't really work right now. Number 24, Lone Survivor. Jasper Byron, is that his name? Made his name the making Silent Hill in the 2D games, and you feel that the series influence throughout his side-scrolling indie games. Creeping monstrosities scrape down barely lit corridors. The world seems to shift around you, and you can never really quite trust your surgical mask protagonist is a good guy. As the only living human so far as you're aware of, anyway, you have to scavenge in through supplies and hide from things that'll go bump in the night, and hope to keep keeping it on. Oh, and you also have to maintain your sanity. Periodically running into your apartment, your base of options to eat some food, get some rest stops before you start hallucinating. The longer you're deprived of the life's basic necessities, the harder to tell what is real and what is not. And that's when things get really hard. Number 23, Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly. Picking up on the tropes of Japanese horror and folklore, with the famous in the Ring and Ju-on, the Fatal Frame series have always been unsettling. Characters are frozen in place with fear. Their only weapon against soul-stealing ghosts is an ancient camera. This means that the only way to fight your enemies is to face them head-on. An increasingly terrifying proposition as the game wears on. The franchise has several great entries, but we choose to single out the second game as the best to fit this list. Crimson Butterfly updates the graphics for a bit of this game and is most inviting in its difficulty, making sure that the ever-present threat without getting too frustrated. It is also the best story, personal journey between two sisters dealing with loss and guilt. It's always nice when the intense experience is backed up with plots that's deeper than to survive. Number 22, World of Horror. A game within a game, World of Horror is a homage to old Macintosh RPGs that is you play on a bulky in-game computer. World of Horror isn't too much scary as it is complex. You'll fight several creepy apparitions in the series of vignettes and manage your stats and equipped between them. Every mystery you encounter is described with an intricate detail, and every decision you make has a potential to help or be harmful. Add to the monsters inspired by the work of Juji Ito, and you get a game that covers several classic horror genres and turn them into a convincing whole. Number 21, Fear. The first-person shooter was the heavier on the shootout action most horror games. The remarkable enemy AI still impresses to this day, while the arson weaponry gets more brutal. Wall painting, weaponized railway spikes, anyone? The more you play. But just as you begin to feel powerful, something that can be simply be shot comes along to put it in your place. Fierce best scare games come about when you're riding the high after clearing out a room full of tough enemies. That's the exact moment when you notice a strange figure staring at you from the end of the hallway. You'll come to a dread through the bumping into the ghastly little girl, Alma, when you least expect it. In a creepy phase, indirectly in your face, dead girls aren't enough. Paxton Fettel seals the deal as a telepathic cannibal who leaves behind remnants of his feasts to find you. For you to find. Objects start to move on their own. All lights will turn out one by one. What happens next? Well, I guess you'll have to play to find that out. I'm so sorry. I cannot read most of those. And my cat's destroyed my hands. Number 20. Alan Wake. Alan Wake isn't like most horror games. It doesn't trade in excessive gore or jump scares. In fact, it's not that scary on a whole. But the sense of place as a character is second to none. The place is Bright Falls, a Twin Peaks-inspired mountain community with terrible secrets. The dulcet tones in the night, DJ rambling across the airwaves, mixed with a little vignettes you can catch on TV, make this town feel alive, like a character unto itself. Its story unfolds like a thrilling TV miniseries, right down to the episodic structure and the bookends each plot twist and revelations. Alan Awake further distinguishes itself by being a lot of fun, being a lot of fun to play. Maybe that sounds a bit mean, but you'd be hard pressed to find it a bit more enjoyable. I'm so sorry. I had to sneeze, but I tried to continue to talk to make it go away. Find a more enjoyable horror game than Alan Awake from a purely gameplay perspective. Developer Remedy is famous for action and storytelling as it comes to bear here as simple, fluid controls do with the stilled awkwardness of the characteristic of this genre. Digging into the group of enemies is challenging for all the right reasons. The encounters are well crafted, and the pistol plus flashlight combat combo is fun to use without making you feel invincible. Number 19, Condemned, the criminal origins. Some games tread the line between real and not real beautifully, and Condemned crime origins murder solving into blurred boundaries beautifully. Starting with a very Hannibal-like, overly staged murder thing are almost immediately wrong. They are barely human homeless attackers to fight, blacklight blood trails that follow, and just things that get worse from there. By the time you're exploring the ruined department store full of people wearing the faces of discarded mannequins, it's hard to tell where you've crossed over from cop-solving crimes to man potentially in hell. It is a very physical game, mostly focused on block and attack melee combat system, with the guns and ammos are rare and treasured respite. It is constantly dark and unpredictable, blurring the lines between a monstrous reality or even something worse. Number 18, Prey. While Morgan Hughes' trek across the Space Station doesn't offer a breathless horror Dead Space does, especially the Mooncrash DLC off Prey's potential for horror, a fairly straightforward alien shooter can become much more unsettling when the goal changes from you defending yourself to saving others, and the element of randomization in Mooncrash does a lot of keeping you on your toes. But basic Prey 2 has a certain spookiness to it. Apart from being a brilliant game with many secret nukes and crannies to discover, Prey is just like any arcane games, give you a certain freedom to approach. Many stories you'll come across the environment tell of horrifying accidents, people trying to flee from alien encounters. If you want a bit more action but all of a good environment and storytelling, this is another game you shouldn't sleep on. Number 17, Little Nightmares. There's a fairy tale to feel Little Nightmares' strange world, but it's a darkly unpleasant one. It's really not suitable for kids unless you want to scar them for life. Focusing on a strange little creature in a yellow mat, you have to escape the maw, a never really explained location full of snuffling, twitchy, grotesque creatures out to get you. While it has issues, some frustrating perspectives and controls, mainly the horrible atmosphere and revolting cast to make you feel the great horror experience. One minute you're trying to sneak around a contorted blind man's impossibly long arms. The next you're running from a tidal wave of flopping obese restaurant gluttons. It is disturbingly a beautiful frame with all love and care as a twisted animated movie. Sorry. Number 16, Until Dawn. Teen slashers have been around for nearly 4 decades now, and aside from the abysmal Friday the 13th on NES, games haven't really been brave enough to venture into that territory. Until now, or rather Until Dawn, a 2015 survival game about a pack of randy teens going on vacation to an isolated mountain cabin, only to find the heinous entity is set on killing them off. But it's not all fun and games. The characters will die gruesome deaths if you can navigate Until Dawn's horror movie logic and takes every opportunity to scare the bejeebus out of you. While many games on this list are here because of their fear factor alone, Until Dawn earns a spot for the more meta reasons too. It is willingly, self-really enriched in horror tradition and uses tropes brilliantly. It's packed with winks and slasher genre, and you'll still love the ridiculous twists, even if they not seem to be coming a mile away. You'll laugh as much as you'll scream, if not more. A few horror games capture the sense of grisly fun so well. I honestly love Until Dawn. I love horror games, but I'm not brave enough myself to do them. But I love watching other people play them because it's just so fun to do that. But Until Dawn's like one of my favorite ones. Number 15, Darkwood. The easiest way to describe Darkwood would be to call it a top-down survival game, but while the survival element exists to keep your character, well, alive, it's less a game about surviving and more about pushing you deeper into the forest of horror so you can enjoy being creeped out on what you find. The only place you're safer is in your hut, so you need to maintain it, but in order to do that, you need to go out. Funny how sometimes that sometimes turns out. On your journey through the woods, you find some weapons to defend yourself with, but better off using a meager inventory space in other ways, frantically pointing the cone of the light that marks how far you can see to and fro and not miss a thing. Darkwood is proof that even a game from a top-down perspective can be absolutely nerve-wracking. Number 14, Evil Within 2. The Evil Within franchise was initially Shinjin Mikami's attempt to reviving the genre he helped build. Survival horrors like Resident Evil that delivers the action and scares alike. The Evil Within 2 certainly delivers the virtual spectacle and nail-biting moments of stealth and action. It's slow to get started, but the open structure allows for plenty of exploration, some variety approaching in your enemies. In short, The Evil Within is confusing and over the top as you remember Japanese horrors to be, and it's still great to play until you play the next Resident Evil. Number 13, Bloodborne. From Software's Dark Souls games, of which our very obvious descendants don't play like horror standards, their action RPGs built stat micromanagement and skillful play. And yet they feel scarier than most games that built themselves around fear. Stress, dread, and jump scares come as frequently as loot and leveling. Bloodborne is the best of the lot, a sprawling, mysterious tale of enriched horror set in a twisted nightmare version of Victorian Europe. Traveling down a cobblestone street amidst the darkest spires, you hear hushed conversations behind firmly locked doors, wondering who you are and what the hunt you seem to be on could be. It's gaming's best Lovecraftian horror. You'll be driven in to discover the secrets as much as you are to discover its vicious combat systems. Number 12, Devotion. Red Candle's game's first Devotion may now be known for its best troubled released history, but its masterclass and environment storytelling. Its horror doesn't come from survival combat or even jump scares, but a feeling of creepy dread mounting in a time with you gathering more information about what happened to inhabitants of the house that you're exploring in. Devotion does a lot of great stuff with visuals. While it might not be the most interesting game for an interactive perspective, it's a great example of how to use space and horror on par like the classics like with Amnesia. Sorry, that got hard to read. These are a lot. Number 11, Resident Evil 4. This is a series that invented modern survival horror, but wasn't good enough for the director Shinji Mikami. So in Resident Evil 4, he invented the modern third-person shooting just for fun. Leon Kennedy's adventures in the game gunplay are rightly famous for the feedback-heavy combat making every situation a shaky joy. But I hear you cry. How does that make it so make it qualify as top 10 horror game. Surely it's just an action experience in Resi clothing. Tell that to anyone coming from the Ganando-infested village for the first time. The sheer stress of just being rushed from the parasite-infested local population, headed up by a sack-masked, chainsaw-wielding maniac, ranks up with the gaming's most frightening moments. It's feeling the returns constantly, whether of the most iconic boss fights, a battle across crumbling rooftops, or the most expected location. Resident Evil 4's horror now puts you in the back foot and asks you to fight your way out. Number 10, Amnesia Rebirth. Building on the themes of memory loss, pursuing monsters, and otherworldly magics, Amnesia Rebirth is built on the previous games in the series. Developer deliver a tense, playable slice of horror fiction. There's almost a literary feel to the game as you explore the darkness as Tassie, a French explorer lost in the desert. Familiar mechanics like failing sanity, eroded by darker-looking monsters returns, but this time contained within a much more coherent and enticing story. There's some great puzzles, horrible monsters, but the narrative that binds it all together. Tassie goes on a journey that is. There's a strong draw to following her to see where all goes and what it means. Whether you're a fan of Amnesia franchise or not, there's a real page-turning, must-see what happens feel to the adventure. The monster encounters can be horrific and stressful, but the space between where the story expands and the twists and turns really sell it. Number 9. Dead Space. If Resident Evil is the king of survival action horror, then Dead Space aimed to be the pretender to the throne, bringing together Capcom's early Dread, Ladder, and Day over-the-shoulder shooting in one gory package. Borrowed from Alien and other sci-fi classics, the 2008 release put players in a role of Isaac Clarke, an engineering trapped on a derelict spacecraft. Soon Isaac finds out that the ship isn't as empty as it seems, as a strange alien artifact has transformed everyone into the board into hideous flesh-eating creatures, even more horrific than the last. Dead Space crafts is a horrifying experience in illuminating the player. Isaac is short on ammo. He really knows what's going on in the continually shifting story. He's the most in danger of what he can't see. So much of the disturbing atmosphere is built on what you hear, and the amazing sound design uses audios to fashion the entire deadly world around Isaac. Though the sequel pulled back on the scares somewhat in favor of the cinematic action, the original remains trapped in our nightmares. Number 8, Soma. Soma has problems largely from clumsy stealth section, but it also has hands down one of the most unpleasant, disturbing stories of anything on this list. To explain why ruin it, but this plays the idea of consciousness to what makes you in a terrifying way. When you're exploring the wrestling decrepit undersea base of Pathos 2, when you're playing a pretty heavy metaphysic concepts fit to give you nightmares. This is a world filled with broken machines, full of glitching humans' consciousness, and slimy growths that expand to grow into something terrible the longer you spend exploring. The undersea biotech elements make Bioshock comparison hard to avoid, but while there are similarities, man's hubris is science pushed too far especially. This is far more unpleasant and ethnically shocking. The new safe mode means you can now play it just for the story. Finish it and see if you can sleep afterwards. Number 7, Outlast. Outlast offers a first-person track through a setting literally no one in real life would willingly check out. An old asylum that seems abandoned, but also strangely very active. At night, in the mountains, miles from help, who does that? And the setup alone is a perfect horror fodder, but plays out like a found footage. The game via clever on video game cameras night vision mode to see in the dark. The glowing green view it creates gets a little too close to real life as well. It's one part of exploring, two parts following shadowy, wheezy shapes in the black distance through a viewfinder while cowering behind a table. Scary enough already, the perfection of its pixelated whirling focus pulls to only add into the atmosphere. It's a great game to play with company as well because you'll both be screaming at some point. I also adore Outlast. It's also probably one of my favorite horror games. Number 6, Silent Hill 2. I was going to say Outlast 2. Silent Hill 2. Yeah. Silent Hill as a franchise is home to some of the most frightening enemies and situations in gaming history, but the series' most abiding horror is Silent Hill 2. The PS2 classic manifests our deeper fears as flesh to reveal there is no greater evil than our own imagination. Though he'll encounter some creatures like the iconic nurse and Pyramid Head, protagonist James Sterland is far more threatened by his personal demons, and the empty town of Silent Hill brings them all to the surface. James has returned to Silent Hill, answering a letter that seems to come from his dead wife, but he also finds our reminders of his own anguish and guilt over her death. Every corner in town is inhabited by some new horror, but James has to push past his fears if he ever wants to know what's going on. You and he will not like what he finds beyond them. Silent Hill 2 doesn't just present you with a horror game worth playing, but a story worth being listened to, parsed, and gaping awfully about. The deeper you go, the worse it gets. Number 5, Resident Evil 2 Remake. It seems almost unimaginable that 20 years after the original PS1 release, the classic Resident 2 Evil is back on the best horror games list. But we are talking about the Resident Evil 2 Remake, a from-the-ground remake of the original game that honors the past while building a future for the franchise with a game nearly 2 decades old. It's a success on the high list because it melds with the old and new so perfectly. It's perfect retelling of Leon and Claire's original attempts to escape the zombie-filled Raccoon City with all the monsters. Set piece and story beats you to remember. But it's also built with today's horror sensibilities, merging an almost beautiful level, indulgent gore with tight gameplay, covered puzzles, and some beautiful levels. This is essential now as the original game was back in the day. Number 4, PT. If you brought together the world's most idiosyncratic game, unsure and one of its greatest film monster creators, and they didn't make one of the most oddest, most horrible game yet released, you'd be pretty upset. God. Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro's playable teaser for the now-canned Silent Hills places you in a single infinite looping hallway and proceeds to find 1,000 ways to terrify you. There's no ideal boast. One member of the game Radar Plus team was unable to play this game with the lights off and was forced to turn the sound down to make it tolerable. There are moments where you face peril, but there are a few far in between. The real terror comes from the unknown. What could be around the next bend? A fresh nightmare or nothing at all? Your imagination fills in blanks, creating more terror than any simple jump scare or creepy noise could. Add an underlying domestic terror that will make any Silent Hill fan nostalgic, and you've got the world's shortest masterpiece horror game shaking in your hands. I'm so sorry. I'm not the best at big words, or especially words I don't understand, so yeah. Number 3, Alien Isolation. Countless games have been inspired of the elements of the Alien franchise, but it be James Cameron's Space Marines, Ellen Ripley's Fortitude, or the chilling power of the silence in the soundtrack. Despite all of that, Alien Isolation may be the series' greatest gaming triumphs. It is with the gut-wrenching fear fostered by the lone xenomorph in the original film and extends into a lengthy game. Isolation's tense survival gameplay keeps the pulse pounding for hours and hours. You take on the role of Ripley's daughter, Amanda, searching the Dialect space station for her mother, only to find the same beast that she fought. You're constantly on guard in the cinematic AI and your alien hunter. This means you're holding your breath as you narrowly avoid detection or screaming in terror after failing to reach safety. The atmosphere in the game sustains is oppressive enough and deserves even more credit for taking the xenomorph, a movie monster borderline on cliche, due to the overexposure and making it terrifying once again. Number 2, Layers of Fear. Most games can make you jump, they can make you scream, but few can make you doubt yourself in real life. Layers of Fear initially appears very familiar as you explore a spooky, creepy, cavernously empty house. The gothic story unravels slowly as you play an unnamed artist returning home. It soon becomes clear, though, that madness has taken over the painter and expresses itself in the unreliable narration of the physical world. Doors disappear, and corridors warp out of shape just in the corner of you. The game rearranges in such a way to recreate the main character's madness that only a few hours and you'll find yourself questioning everything. Was the desk on this side of the room the last time you looked? Are you sure? Add to the nature of the protagonist's illness an obsession painting made from less savory material, and you'll have yourself a greatest horror game of all time. And coming in at number 1 is Resident Evil 7. It could have been a disaster, a clunky forced update to the reverbed series that left fans clamoring on the bombastic nonsense of Resident Evil 6, but Resident Evil 7 is a triumph smarty feeding off the best horror movies the last 20 years, effortlessly easing all the edgy new into a recognizable modern reinvention of the series. The central story is fantastic. The mysteries artfully concealed, and your tormentors, the Bakers, are brilliantly subversive. Switch in the action to the first person, add some VR possibilities, but also makes the horror feel uncomfortably close, grueling, compelling stuff, and something you'll remember a long time after you close it up. Exploring it up close. Well, something you'll remember long after exploring it up close. But perhaps the cleverest trick if how it all feels. The safe rooms have the same sense of unsettling respite. Ammo feels desperately sacred or scarce, and the boss fights have the right mix of terror and glowing, oozing bits to shoot. It's a tight, smart horror game, and far better than most fans dared to hope. It's not the scariest or most subtle game on this list, but it's brilliant and chilling rebirth. And that is all that I have for you. So which ones on these lists do you think is the best horror movie in your opinion? I generally think that Outlast and Outlast 2, well, I definitely Outlast, is probably the scariest for me because I haven't seen much of these horror games, but yeah, let me know down in the comments on what you think. I hope you all enjoyed. If you're new to my channel, be sure to hit subscribe and thumbs up. Also, the basic videos, which is daily. I'm so sorry that I could not read through half of those. My brain just gets jumbled sometimes. So, I love you guys, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.